And welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I, of course, am your host, Coach Camp, and I am down here in these youthfully yummy studios of SRP with Mr. Derek Michaud. Hey, folks. I have something special this week. This episode is really cool because, when you do things in life, you're going to be brought into other people's lives. You're going to cross paths with folks that you would have never met if you didn't take a chance on something. And then sometimes those individuals are going to have a huge impact on who you are. And in this case, because of Coach Camp and the platform of this podcast, it gives you opportunities to highlight that story. And so this week, man, The Blox. You've heard me talk about this. The TV show that I'm on that's not come out yet, that is an entrepreneur show. It's going to come out on Amazon Prime. This is where I met this lady. And we got to know each other just a little bit because you only have 1 week and you're full of activities. But her story resonated with me. And whenever she got to talk to me a little bit about the things she had been through and then why she was at The Blox, which is, of course, entrepreneur. She had a product. She was doing stuff, putting her life together. I was like, wow, let me get your name if you would be interested to come on the show. And here we are. The day is now. This lady has been awake for a hot minute. She drove down from Asheville, North Carolina, just to be here, which I got to tell you guys, it always warms my heart when people invest in me because I know how important it is for you guys out there. Her story is going to be very impactful. So my guest this week is Miss Michelle Kolcan. She is, like I said, from Asheville, North Carolina. Her title is, and I'm going to make sure I read this right, Holistic Health Practitioner.
Yes.
That is correct. So at this time, please welcome with me, Miss Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm great, actually. Excited and I'm happy to share.
So look, obviously I use a lot of words to bring us in, but here's the thing. I never want anyone to feel like when you come into the studio that we're going through the motions. I want every episode to be about my guest. And this is all about Michelle. So I want you to understand that it's not just your story that matters, but it's what your impact of your story that's going to have on other people and where you've come from, what you've been through and what you're doing now. Because it's enough, I think, to just see a person come through a storm, but you didn't just take that storm and be a victim from it. You're thriving now on the other side of it, and that's going to be exciting. So let's just start with a little bit of an introduction, if you would. Let my listeners know, where are you from? Where did you grow up? Family members.
When I was 19, I could count that I had boxed up things and moved 42 times.
42?
So I can't really say that I'm from a particular area. I was born in Arizona, moved around a lot. My family, I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
And my parents, they divorced when I was 14. So up until that point, that was a pretty rocky road, actually. But I could say a good part of my life was in Georgia, and another part of my life was in Greenville, South Carolina. So I tell people I'm part city and part country. I don't mind getting my hands dirty because I've been out in the woods. But I also don't mind having some stores, kind of close to me either. And, but yeah, that's
so 42 times
from.
Up until the age of 19.
Yeah.
Were they like big moves or were they sometimes just subtle moves? Like around the corner?
Sometimes they were big moves. Yeah. Because my parents didn't get along. And so it was leaving my father actually a few times. And, so that made it tough. We did have a rather dysfunctional childhood.
Yeah. And that plays into a lot of stuff sometimes.
It really does, because especially when you don't know, when you're told, hey, you kids, you grab one bag of stuff and we're leaving in the middle of the night. We don't know where we're going, but we're going to be gone.
And so 42 times, that happened a lot of times.
Well, as far as moving, my father was in the military in the beginning, so we moved around a little bit because of that. But for the most part, and we started with, when I was 5 and 6 years old, we lived in the projects. We didn't have money. And my dad decided at one point, because my one brother was getting sick all the time, to go really healthy or vegetarian. We went strictly raw fruits and vegetables. Nothing was to even be steamed. Only water to drink. We did that for 2 years.
How old were you at that time?
I was I was 5 years old, so
and
5
you remember
and 6.
That pretty well.
I remember that, and
Wow.
I bring that up too because that was the time we were living in the projects. And at one time, I remember the only thing we had to eat was carrots and tomatoes.
Wow.
Carrots and tomatoes, and but parents are people too trying, and there were 4 of us kids, and it takes a while to get your feet grounded, especially when they didn't have, a rich upbringing themselves and
Sure.
things handed to them. And so really all through my life, I feel like I've been in survivor mode.
I mean, I would think
reasons.
so. I mean, I get it at 5. Sometimes you don't. A person could say they didn't understand what they didn't have. And to an extent, there's truth to that. But then when there is, true depravity, a kid does recognize that we don't have the same things other kids have. Another reason why I ask about were they big moves or small moves, because if you're just moving from like one city to the next city over, sometimes you don't lose friends and part of your identity is still there if you're in the area. Yeah. But if you're like moving states away or
we
big
went
cities away,
that's
a restructure every time.
Yeah.
You don't know anyone.
In 7th grade, I was in 3 different schools.
Wow, that's got to be so hard.
I have learned, I believe I do well on my own because I've learned not to be okay without a support system or without friends, really. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, most people like me, but
I think you're a wonderful
friends,
person. Yeah.
I haven't really built up a big old group through the years because I've moved
You kept hitting reset.
Yeah.
It was tough to invest in a person for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me to my next question. So first, where did you land in the sibling lineup?
I was oldest.
So you're the oldest, I've had several guests recently that were youngest.
Yeah.
And they talk about how they were spoiled and stuff. But when you're the oldest, and I can speak from perspective on that, me being the oldest, even though I just have one brother, I think certain levels of responsibility are put on you, and you have 3 younger siblings. So, obviously, in a lot of ways, you're the leader of that group. So how did that play as you grew up? I mean, were your relationship with your brothers, sisters, was it pretty good?
It was. Me and the brother closest to me, there was a short amount of time where me and him used to sit like inside of this big bush and we would talk about our crushes at school. And so we got along really great. But for the most part, my sister, she hated me. I mean, she would throw things at me, and me and her are 4 years apart. Wow. But I was the goody two-shoes of the family. I was the one that liked to stay in the room and read a book versus being outside all the time, which I heard in one of your podcasts before that your parents would just like kick you out early in the morning.
Oh,
and
as soon as we wake up, they're like, hey, all right, we'll see you when the sun goes down.
And my mom did the same thing, actually, but she would let me stay inside and do some reading. I loved being outside, too, though, and we lived in the woods with a creek, and I liked being down by the creek. But, yeah, the other 3, they really got close, the 3 of them, and
so
I was
instead of you
own.
being like the leader of the pack, you kind of felt like an oddball out, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. Wow. Although later on, I ended up having to pick up some of the slack with things that were going on with the family and kind of help out. And I got custody of my sister when she was 16. And
how old were you then?
I was 20.
Yeah, so it was the one that was 4 years younger.
So, and my mom went through a lot because of her relationships, and I felt like I had to be there to protect her when the other kids moved out because of the family situation. And they moved in with my father, and my father worked 3rd shift, and my siblings got into a lot of trouble. He was he worked for the Correctional Institute. He was a supervisor there with people that had only 2 to 5 years left of a sentence, and he would have to work 3rd shift watching over them all night. So he had a really stressful job, but he's got some integrity, and I think that I have learned some integrity from my parents and what we've been through, because we keep going, keep trying.
That persistence. It's funny because you talk about how you were a little different than your siblings, and you all grew up in the same house together and stuff. But it is funny how personalities can be so vastly different under the same roof, where like you have one person that is a bookworm that is really not, really don't want to go outside, not rough and tumble. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just suggesting that kind of scenario takes place. And then the other person's just like, Evel Knievel out there just jumping ditches with bikes and stuff. And it's kind of funny. My brother and I were not that different. The difference was I was better at not getting caught. And he got caught a lot at doing the things he shouldn't be doing, where it just looked like I didn't. I did them. I just didn't get caught. But I will say this. When it comes to your upbringing, there are a lot of times there are layers. There's foundational layers that are happening or taking place that you may not recognize in the moment. And it may take decades to manifest to the point where you can look back and say, wow, I'm this type of person. And I can see where these moments in life either set me back or they set me up. Because I think so many things in our life will actually have a very large impact on who we either become or who we don't become. And a lot of times it's the mindset that we develop when we get older. And so you just mentioned some of that tenacity and perseverance. I think it would be easy for a person in your position, just now getting to know some of your backstory, that you've been through so much instability. Whenever you're moving constantly and you don't have that comfort. Because see, I think about myself, right? I was in the military. I traveled quite a bit doing different things. And when I travel, and I can't explain to you, it may be a very comfortable setting that I'm in. I may be on vacation, enjoying the moment. But there's just something about coming home. There's something about getting in your own bed and feeling safe. And home is home. And you cannot really truly appreciate that from where you've come from as a kid, because you never had that long-term stability of this is home.
Yeah.
And so when you get older, you could look at that as a huge stumbling block. And so clearly, when we get to the back end of the story, people are going to recognize, oh, wow, she overcame so many different things. But I just want to make sure I build that part of the story in there, is that, all of those things mattered. Even if your home life would have been peachy. All right, let's just say it that way. Let's just say there was no turmoil. Still, the things that you're going through, having to transition and re-find yourself in another place. Because let's face it, as much as we like to think of ourselves as individuals, me included, y'all, we are tribal by nature. We find those people, as the expression is, birds of a feather flock together. Yeah. There's truth to that. You want to find your people you click with. It's not to say you're looking down on someone else, but you feel comfortable with a group, right? You can be you. You didn't have that.
No.
You didn't have that opportunity. So did you ever see, or now do you see, how that may have affected you back then?
Absolutely. Because you do feel alone sometimes, and you don't always want to feel like you're a soldier trying to soldier on alone through life, when life can be so hard and can be so tough, and you have these big decisions to make, and yet you've got nobody really to talk to and confide in. Now, I did have a few people, and you mentioned you're curious maybe about who would have mentored me. So when I was 5 years old, my mother, she really started with a religion, and I don't like talking about religion really, or politics, but I will say that as I grew up, I did have people in the religion who kind of took me under their wings. So even though my mom was really depressed and at home a lot in bed because she was dealing with what she was dealing with, I had people that took me outside of the home, and we went to teach people the Bible. And the other three kids, they didn't do that, but I did, and it helped.
What age were you, if you don't mind?
So that was from the time I was 5 until I was like 19. And
so it was the bulk of your life.
It was. It was. And
when you say religion, what you're referring to, though, is you can obviously
like
branch this. So you could have
Yeah.
Baptist, Catholic, all that stuff. I get it.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is when y'all moved around,
Yeah.
you stayed within that church, if we just call it that way.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, I got what you're saying now.
Yeah.
So from 5 to 19, you had that influence.
I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to interrupt, so I was wanting to make sure I captured what it exactly was you were saying. Okay.
And quite a few of them, even like I say, a good part of my life I was in Georgia. Well, we might have been in like 3 or 4 different homes, but we were still in that same congregation. So people did get to know me for a few years, at least to that degree. And I had some that were like family to me, who I viewed as a father or a brother or big sister. And But that's a whole nother part too of me changing with my life, because I left the religion when I was 19. And when you leave the religion, the way that things happen, they pretty much like excommunicate you. You cannot talk to anyone who is in that religion baptized. And you can't even talk to your family members who are of that religion. So I couldn't talk to my mom for about 8 years until I went back into the religion. Mm-hmm. But that's a whole other part too of losing family and overcoming and having to again feel alone.
Yeah. And I understand the hesitation on discussing a person's religion or politics, because let's face it, I actually had a whole podcast about politics versus perspectives.
Hear you a good bit. It's divisive, very
divisive. It can be, and I think it's because people want to believe so deeply in what they believe in. It's hard to hear a different perspective, and they become defensive. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that stems from an insecurity, to be quite honest with you, because I'm not saying I've always been this way, Michelle. I'll be 51 this month. When I was there, I know, right? I celebrate them, baby, because you never guaranteed another one. You never guaranteed another one. And so when I was in my 30s, especially in my 20s, I realized my lens to life was very narrow. And my perspectives and ideas, they were probably a lot more polarizing. And reflecting on that now, doing what I do and what I've been doing, and having so many interactions with so many people across America and the world now from all the things I've been able to be a part of, what it does allow you to do is see a broader scope of why people see the world the way they do and why they feel the way they do, versus just you can only see it the way you see it or you feel it. And that's normal. That's what I found too, is that I can't allow myself to get caught up in another person's anxieties about something, because what I've come to realize is I was the same way at a point. It took time to recognize that you are always going to feel defensive if you're not willing to hear another person's perspective.
Yeah.
Because
and
you
I
want to
don't
defend you.
judge at all.
I know you wouldn't.
I'm very open-minded.
Sure you
and
are.
That's something that I have found to be freeing over the years too.
It is.
And I mean, I've left and gone back to this religion 3 times. I mean, I was trying to serve God and, be as good as I thought I should be, even though I had feelings that made it hard for me to go back to that. But, and I've studied different religions too, but now I'm to the point where I just try to love as much as I can and help as much as I can with people and let them see that, you don't even have to be part of a religion to have someone here that's willing to care for you and love you and help you. And
you're absolutely right about that.
So much that
you're spot on in the fact that, and again, it goes back to the identity factor, which builds a part of your story in the fact that you've grown up having to, almost re-find yourself constantly. That was your one constant. And so that area definitely defined a lot of who you were and who you were becoming. And, again, to our conversation piece here, for me, I found that having faith is not the same as having religion. And religions a lot of times are divisive depending on what that religion is. And I'm not talking bad about anyone's stuff, but this is just the actual reality of what I have been a part of or seen. And so when a person has faith, really what they're wanting to do is they're looking for that higher power. Because I do believe in that myself, which is, if somebody doesn't, that's up to them. That's fine. But for me, I do believe in that. And sometimes when we allow ourselves to be caught up so much in this isolated piece of our life, we can only see the whole world that way. It can become toxic if you have individuals in that circle that's all they feed you, right?
But
so
also,
you had to break free of some stuff.
I feel like too, the way I was brought up, there's a scripture that says, that even the stones would cry out to get the message out, if you didn't speak. But if you didn't, then you would be considered blood guilty. I always had this major conscience battle thing going on, like, gosh, Michelle, there was someone right behind you at the grocery store. You should have told them about God, and it's like this, this huge pressure to always preach and share. And if you have something good to share, you really ought to, or you could be blood guilty. And that has followed me through my life too, even with what I currently do with my consultations and my skincare is, I hate sales. I really do. But I do what I do because I feel like I've got something important that could save a person's life and I need to share it with them. And I'm thankful for that part that was instilled in me, the ability to share, because then I've been able to help people. But it also is a pressure and sometimes a lot of concern that you didn't help enough. And so sometimes you have to learn to not to be guilty or be down on yourself and really just keep moving forward. And something too with my religion, like I wanted to be a missionary when I was 14. So we were taught to be very selfless, and I think too, as you grow older, really the whole time you're growing up, you need to learn to care for yourself as much as other people also. So I feel like it's been a battle for me over time to learn that balance. How much do I give to someone else while I'm taking care of myself?
Right.
Or because I was always used to giving and giving and giving and giving and giving or worrying and worrying and worrying and worrying, and then you can become physically sick from that. And that's
100%.
So
I think you're a living testament to this conversation right now. You're sitting here, not for personal gain, but to share your story to help someone else.
Yeah.
You just traveled, you sacrificed time. And it's a vulnerable story, right?
Yeah, it's awful.
But you understand the need for that because somebody else out there, many somebodies, is going through similar things or have been through similar things and they haven't found their way out of that storm yet. So that's why you knew that this message was so important, which is why you dedicated yourself to coming all the way to Hernando, Mississippi to share this story, which I'm very appreciative to. And I know I have thousands of listeners literally all over the world. I get people contacting me from like Australia and stuff. And the messages, this is one thing too that I have loved about podcasting. It has made the world small. What you think in your country or your state or your city is just very unique to you. The problems are the same worldwide.
Yeah.
It may be a different scope of it, but it's the same kind of stuff. People are going through the same kind of things that you're going through in Hong Kong. They're going through the same thing that you're going through in Australia or Great Britain. It's happening. And so this type of stuff is so important, and the message is so much bigger than yourself. And I know that you know that. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
So moving forward just a little bit, want to talk about your mom. So you said that she had a couple of relationships that were bad.
Yeah.
How much of that did you witness and up to what age? Because that's, I think, going to be a big part of what happens next.
Honestly, as kid, at least me, I didn't know what was really going on between my mom and dad until after they got divorced when I was 14. Then she told me that there were things that happened behind closed doors that us kids didn't know about. So it wasn't in
front of y'all, which...
No, I had seen them get upset with each other a couple of times, and my mom has had some very emotional situations that could make me cry because I know that how dark she got, and I'm sure she still battles with some of that now. But yeah, as far as their relationships go, and then when she remarried, that man, I don't even like to say his name. I don't like to. I mean, he destroyed the family that we had left after.
How long was it from the divorce to when she got remarried?
Well, they were separated for like a year and a half, and then once they divorced, she got married a month later.
So you're still 14?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
And he was verbally abusive, alcoholic behind closed doors. He was in the religion too, but the elders in the congregation didn't believe what was going on when it was shared to them. And later on, when my mom's health got worse, because he wasn't helping take care of her, wouldn't even let her drive anywhere at one point to see a doctor, I stepped up and let her move in with me for a bit, and I wrote the headquarters of the religion, and I was like, this is going on. You guys need to know about it, something that needs to be done, or he is not the person that needs to be out teaching people the Bible because he's doing this and he's destroying lives, and he's not.
Was he being verbally and physically abusive to your mom?
Verbally, yes. Physically, maybe once that I wasn't sure, honestly.
But verbally, was that in front of you guys?
Absolutely.
It was?
And he's just a very awful person.
Sure. No, people exist like that. Absolutely, yeah.
And I hate that. And because of the religion too, she felt like she should leave, but she should also go back and try and make things work. That's what she was told. And I'm talking time after time after time after time. In the last couple of years, she's not been with him. She's finally staying gone for good. But that's also kind of how it was with my initial, with my dad. She felt she had to make it work, so she kept going back, though their relationship was a little different. But sometimes I've kind of wondered, is that why some of my relationships didn't continue? Did I end it too soon? Did I try to leave a situation?
Because you felt like that played into it, and you're like, you see where this is going. You watched it with your mom. You're not going to keep going down the road.
Right. And I do not believe that because of your family's history, that's going to be your life too.
Right.
And
it certainly doesn't have to be, but I think it is fair to say it's an influence, and some people will not move past that, right? They do what they know. And if a person sees bad relationships, that may be what they're drawn to, and they think that's normal. And that's the normalization of something, right? Yeah. But you're right. It's not like it's genetic. It's not like you're predisposed to have the same problems.
Right.
But a lot of times what happens is people follow that same path because that's the path they know.
Right.
Now, we are going to go to a break here, but here's the thing, and I think that we've built this up to a really good turning point, because what we have seen is while you have had some less than great mentorship along the way in some areas, in other areas you were being given building blocks, and you hinted at that in the fact that you recognized that the toxicity that you had seen your mom deal with, you were not going to deal with. Well, I think also to that point, while that could have been a strength as well, but I think that the ability to recreate who you are and hit reset, you didn't allow that to be an excuse. You allowed that to be a stepping stone. And that's not an easy thing, but that is a conscious choice. And I think that's the thing that I want my listeners to hear right there.
It is a choice.
When something is happening to you, it's not always your fault, but what you do next is up to you. You have to make that decision. What are you going to do with it? Because you 100%. Will have that turning point.
Yeah.
But you got to want it. So you guys do not want to miss what's coming up after this, and how Miss Michelle has put her life back together, some of the things that she's doing, and how it's going to have a huge impact on so many people out there. So come back right after this message.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
Okay, everybody, welcome back from the break. I am here with Miss Michelle Kolcan. As you guys know, you've been listening along today, and she's been sharing some of her story about growing up and having to move around a lot, going through some tough times, and being witness to some difficult moments, especially with her mom and relationships. And at this point in time, as your mom is going through this tough relationship, and you said you had moved your mom in with you, how old are you at that moment when your mom's moving in with you?
I was probably like mid-30s.
You were mid-30s.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
so, but you said at 20, you took care of your sister.
Yeah, at 20.
So then this was an extended amount of time that you were going through some tough stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So how many years do you think?
Oh, my gosh. I wouldn't say my life really started going extremely positively well until gosh, maybe 7 years ago.
Okay.
So I'm 46 now.
Okay.
Like 39, 38. Yeah, 38.
So you were going through a lot of trenches.
Oh, yeah.
And so at 20, what is it that makes you move your sister in with you? I'm assuming it's your mom's relationship.
Yeah, well, because my mom got remarried and that was so terrible, my brothers and sister moved in with my dad, and there was no supervision at night because he worked third shift. They were teens, though, so you may think they are fine on their own, but they got in with a really bad crowd. And they tried to actually get in with a gang, and it was really bad.
Where were you guys living
and they
at
all
that
got
time?
in trouble for it. Georgia. Athens, Georgia. And so my sister, she was put in a boot camp, and my brothers, one was put in a YDC, and my other was actually tried as an adult. He had burned a car in the back of a building, and he'll tell anybody, so I don't mind telling him myself. Yeah. But they tried him as an adult because he was almost that age, and he went to prison for 2 years, and that was a lot of worry, and I had to learn the hard way, that you can't worry so much or you get physically sick, and you can only control what you can control. But that was very hard. And when my sister came out, my mom was still with that guy, and so my sister did move back in with my mom. She had to, but she ran away like twice. So my mom said, Michelle, you need to try with her. And my sister was happy I had a car. She was 16.
She was 16, driver's license.
At that point, we got along.
Yeah, right.
She didn't like me when I was little, but...
You had something to offer now.
Yeah, so what was really nice, too, is where I lived, they were offering a program for women who were in low-income state. And so you got to actually build your own home if you provided 65% of the labor. And your mortgage payments would only be around $300 something a month. There was 7 of us women who got approved for it. I was one of the 7, and me and my sister got to work on building a house together. And we had to actually help build these other homes too. None of us could move in until they were all finished. But unfortunately, they went through about 8 different contractors with this program. It was very unorganized, terrible, went beyond in months. And in those later months that never should have taken place, that time period and what was going on, my car tore up and I could not fulfill the requirements with the time, and I lost my home. I mean, we were given vouchers to go and pick out the color carpet, the color, paint that we wanted, the countertops, the fixtures. We were getting brick homes, so we got to choose the color of the brick and the shingling. I mean, I dug footers and I helped shingle the house, and it was an amazing
like Christmas
experience.
Getting taken away.
And it was a huge loss, but I wouldn't be where I'm at now.
It's a devastating moment. Of course, nobody signs up for those moments, but yeah, you got strength from it later.
Yeah, and
so where did you go from there?
My sister bonded from that.
Yeah.
So my sister ended up going in a different way, maybe about 2 years later when she was an adult, and I moved in with a girl in another part of Georgia, and then just started working and doing my own adult thing. Started doing a lot of karaoke and visiting bands around town. And so I was not part of the religion at that point.
So karaoke was bad?
Well,
because I karaoke poorly.
They frowned upon being at the bars anyway, which is always where I was. And I wasn't big on getting drunk or anything, but that's what I love, the music and karaoke. And I drank socially a little bit here and there. Anyway, from there, I met a guy, and we actually ended up getting married.
And how old were you at that time?
I was 22.
Okay.
We both were 22. And I knew he was impulsive at the start, but got married to him, and 2 years later I felt he wasn't really impulsive anymore, and I could get off birth control, and if we had a kid, we had a kid, and if we didn't, we didn't, but we had a little boy. And I thought things would be great because my ex, he actually had a 5-year-old brother when he was in his 20s, and he helped his parents raise this little kid, so he was used to changing diapers, and I had no qualms with us having a kid and him possibly being able to care for him. But it was opposite of what I thought it would be. And ultimately, he got 2 jobs, coming home, didn't even want to hold his baby. He he ended up telling me he couldn't handle the fact that he was a father.
Yeah.
And he had been blowing all our money. And I said, listen, you mess with this next paycheck, I'm gone. And I left next paycheck. We had $35 to our name, and I took our vehicle and our son, and I moved near where my mom was at. They had just moved out of a home. And
do you think some of that strength came from you growing
my mom leaving
and feeling confident that you could start over? Because I think that's a big thing. A lot of people fear the unknown.
Yeah.
And whenever you're talking about a big life change, it's so much easier to stay where you are, even if you're not happy,
that's
just
true.
because you're afraid of what might happen next.
Yeah.
But you clearly embraced the moment and you're like, let's just do it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. So, but I left him. And I'm kind of shortening my story just a little bit so that I can get through our time. But I met a guy who was very charming and kind with me and my son. And about a month after dating him, I had another vehicle situation where my car tore up, couldn't really get back and forth to work. And he was living with his mom at the time. And he said, why don't you move in with us? So me and my son moved in with him, and about a month later, she died, his mother. And he knew when he first met me that I didn't do drugs, that I was not that kind of person. I didn't smoke cigarettes, blah, blah, blah. And he told me the same, though he smoked cigarettes. Well, I found a pipe that had fallen out of his pocket one day. He said he was carrying it for a friend. I didn't know anything about drugs, really. I mean, I had this real religious background, and I had been taught to, even if somebody's going through things, they can change, blah, blah, blah. Because the second time that I saw one, he admitted it was his. And he said that he was doing drugs when we met, and when his mom passed away, he was doing worse, and he was on meth. And I did not realize what I was dealing with at that point. But he was still treating us okay.
That is an interesting fact I want to point out.
Yeah.
That you were so well traveled, yet you were also, and correct me if I'm wrong on this assumption, fairly sheltered.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like an oxymoron almost? It's like, you've traveled all over, but kind of naive to what is really going on. But if you've not been exposed to it, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I think that part of the story is important because somebody out there right now may have found themselves in that kind of situation or thinking to themselves, how can I be duped on that? But if you've not seen it, been around it, been a part of it, known people that did it.
Yeah. And then when he's telling you, oh, I need your help,
Sure.
you do help me and I want to get off of the drugs. And you've been taught, no matter what a person's history, they can change. And by that time, I felt I was in love with them. So I stuck it out for a little while.
At that point?
For maybe, honestly, maybe a few months.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know if this had drug on for years, but so then, but you connected and you felt like, hey, look, I think this too probably plays into it. It sounds a lot like what you've already expressed on this show, that you're a giver and you feel like there is an obligation of you to help others and to share with others and to give to others. And maybe in a way,
that was a big part of it.
This was a project.
Yeah.
And I hate to use that word, but I know that's a common conception. And it goes in both directions, in relationships. A person will see another person and think, oh, I can fix them. I can help them. I can change them. I need to be there for them. It's my job to do that. And you've already kind of laid a foundation that was a part of who you were as a person. And so you saw an opportunity to make his life better.
Absolutely. But with that drug especially, that's one of the few drugs I've learned since. It messes with the part of the brain where it's the emotional center, and they really cannot care about another person. And he started becoming abusive and
physically, or
it wasn't physical at first.
Yeah,
but he was starting to threaten to be physical, at least with my son. And
how old was your son at that time?
Well, I'll fast forward a little bit.
Sure.
Let's say around 2.5.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit before then, but 2.5 is when really things hit the fan because at that point I realized that he did hurt my son. And I had already tried several times to leave him because things had gotten really bad. And this is really the biggest reason why I wanted to come on today, because you're all about motivating. Mm-hmm. And I want to motivate other, not just women, because men are in abusive relationships too, to not give up and keep trying. Don't think, that you're stuck in a situation, even if it's lasted for a long time. Things got really bad, and the friends that I had made, I lost because they said they didn't want drama in their life, and they were scared too. So they withdrew, out of my life. I didn't have them. My family, immediate family, lived a state away, so it was not easy to try and lean on them. And this was a person who, one time I tried to leave, and he grabbed me out the door and threw me on the floor and grabbed the phone wire out of the wall and tied me up. Or another time when I ran out the window and ran to the next door neighbor's house, and he ran after me, and he broke down the neighbor's door. She locked it, but she had kind of an older house, and it was easy, and he knocked in the door. I mean, one time I got his brother to help me move actually some things to the state where my family lives. I already had a place lined up, went down there, paid the rent, moved my stuff in. Day later, I'm getting a call from my family. So-and-so's here at the house threatening, and you need to come. And sure enough, he was threatening to hurt my family if I didn't come home with him. Another time he threatened to burn the house down. I mean, another 2-3 times he would go out and just slash a tire or throw some. I mean, one time I was driving away and he threw something at the window so hard, glass just went all over my body. And they think, well, why don't you leave? Why don't you leave him? Well, it's hard when they follow you, or they threaten to hurt your family, or they come see you at work, and it doesn't matter that your boss put a
restraining order.
Well, practically. Yeah. So it's not. It wasn't easy. Eventually, what happened was I moved out secretly, and I moved in with this woman and with my son, and I called his brother again for some help. Well, a couple days later, after I'm with this lady, I answer the phone, her phone rings, and it's my ex on the phone. He had found out where I was, and I was like, how in the world did you? He said, well, I just looked through my brother's phone, and I saw that, there was a call I didn't recognize, and it obviously went to you. And he's like, I want to get my life together. I'm changing my life. I'm moving in with my brother. I need your help, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'm not going to come to your house. I'll give you a ride. Which was so stupid of me. And my son was with me. And I said, you can meet me at Walmart. Get the neighbor to bring you, because he said his car had broken down. So the neighbor brings him to Walmart, and he gets in the passenger side, and we start going down the road a bit, and I need to make a turn, and he grabs the steering wheel to turn the opposite direction. And he starts taking control of even the gas pedal from the passenger side, trying to get me to go toward his house. We get to a stop sign, and like a dummy, I jump out of the driver's side. I run to the car who's behind us, and I say, call 911, this is happening, blah, blah, blah. Well, nice enough it was of the person behind us to follow us, but by that time, my ex had gotten in the driver's side, and he knew all the back roads, and he was just flying through them back roads, and he lost the person behind us. And we stayed in the back of a church parking lot for a few hours until he felt we were safe enough to go to his house. We get to his house. He's already got all the windows nailed from the outside shut.
And was your son in the car with him?
Yes.
So he had your son.
He already had a mattress inside the closet where we were going to have to sleep. And he had a drill out and a board, and he was nailing the bedroom door shut so that we couldn't escape out of it. And he made us sleep in the closet. He wouldn't even let me touch my son. This whole time, he was trying to convince me to move back in with him. He's like, I know you still love me. I know
hold on. I got to pause here. So hang on.
Yeah.
So the person takes you to the house,
Mm-hmm.
and you go up to the house, and the person leaves? He captured you? He did capture you, or no?
He kidnapped us, but that was because I met him at Walmart with my vehicle.
Okay, so that's the part I guess I got confused with. So you jumped out of the car and you got in a car with someone else.
Oh, no. I didn't get in the car. I just told them, call 911 because this is happening. And my son's in the back seat of my car.
Okay.
And I go back. But when I go back to my car, I have to get in the passenger side because he had gotten in the driver's side.
So when did they not call the police?
They did. But he lost them. I mean,
So then how did you, because this
woods.
is the part where I think I got lost on. So how did you end up back with him and then at the house?
He had us sitting in the back of a church parking lot for 3 hours, and then he took us over to his house. So he lost, the people that were following us, and then took us over there. So
I got you. So now you're kidnapped, you and your son.
Yeah. And for 3 days, and after the third day, or on the third day, I told him, I said, I think I'm pregnant with our son, or with our kid. And I said, I want to go to the health department and get checked out. Will you please take me to the health department? And I knew that he wanted a kid. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we could get out of the house that way, and hopefully I could get help. But we get to the health department, and he's like, look, you call the cops. I see them pull up in the parking lot, and me and your son are just walking out the door. So I didn't tell anybody what was going on. But it turns out I was pregnant with his kid. Mm. And that's how I was able to convince him that I would move back in. I said, well, now that we have a child together, yes, I'll try one more time, blah, blah, blah. And he says, okay, well, you can go get your stuff, but until you come back with your stuff, you're still not even touching your son. Like, he still wouldn't let me with my
And at this point, your son's 2.5 years old. Yeah.
So I leave the house to go get my stuff, but I go immediately down the road. Fortunately, there's still a payphone, actually.
Yeah.
And I called the police. And I said, listen, this is what's going on. I said, and 2 cops came, 2 different cars. I said, please, he said, if the cops come, he's going to hurt my son. Please do not pull up in the driveway. There's a space where you can go beyond the house. Well, one of the cops pulled up right in the driveway. And he knows, my ex, that all you got to do really is not open the door.
Yeah.
I mean, because I had called the cops before in our relationship.
Right.
And they would come. He would just wouldn't open the door, and the cops would just leave. So anyway, what eventually got him to open the door was I went around the back of the house and saw that something was funny with the air conditioner. I was able to push the air conditioner into the house. And he opened the door to see what was going on, and that's when the cops started questioning him. Mm. Well, they check out my son to see if he had been hurt, because he had threatened. They didn't see anything externally, really. I mean, he had ant bites and a little scrape on his back, but that was explainable. He had fallen in the bathtub, and there was a little sailboat in there that had got his back. Anyway, they said, well, so they called a photographer. Photographer came to the home, took pictures.
What year is this?
This is back in 2007.
Okay. So much of the story is like, why is he not arrested? I know. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like my mind is like racing.
I know. So they took pictures, and they saw the mattress was in the closet. They saw the nails on the outside of the windows. They saw one box of items that belonged to my son in one of the rooms. Because when we moved out, we left one box behind.
Mm-hmm.
They saw no second toothbrush, no second pillow, no clothes that belonged to us. Nothing to show that we would have been living there. The house was trashed because he'd obviously had a friend over there. And my ex didn't drink, but his friend did. And there were beer cans all over. It was filthy at that point. I mean, I used to keep the house spotless, but I had been gone for at least a week at that point.
Yeah.
And it was trashed. Well, anyway, the cops say, well, we need to take your son to the hospital and get him checked out, make sure there's nothing internally going on that we just can't see. And they asked my ex, do you do drugs? And he told them the truth, and he said, yes, I do. And right after he said that, and they're taking my statement, the guy who's taking my statement, he tears it up right in front of my face. He says, like, all right, we know the story. We see this all the time. Just lump me in with all these other stories in the past that didn't believe, obviously, then at that point, what was going on with all that was showing. I mean, just obvious. Put in the police report that I was living there with him. Just insane. But with my son, they asked him, did anybody hurt you? And he said, yes. And they asked him who? And he looked at my ex and he said his name. So they got an ambulance there. They take my son in the ambulance. They wouldn't let me ride with them. And I said, well, can I please follow the ambulance to the hospital? And they said, okay. I get there. Cops come out to me and they said, you're not going home with your son.
The ambulance didn't let you ride with them?
Correct.
There's so many things I got to talk to you about off the air. Please continue.
There was so much wrong with what was going on. But
yes.
So they said, your son's not going home with you. And I was like, why? What's going on? They said, he's got bleeding in the bottom of his brain. So he was either hit really hard or he was shaken really hard. And so we're charging your ex with unlawful conduct toward a child, and we're charging you with neglect because of the condition of the home. I couldn't believe it. They said, we want you to come to the police station to ask questions. And I said, yeah, I'm willing to cooperate, whatever. I drive there. I drive myself. Again, I start going through my story. Halfway through, they cut me off. They say, all right, stand up. I stood up. They cuffed me. They put me in the women's detention center. They put a warrant out for his arrest. And then they went to go back and arrest him. But he was gone by then. He didn't get arrested. 2 days later, I'm finding out somebody has paid to get me out.
It was him.
It was him.
Of course.
Did they ever check his license to see who was picking me up? No, because if they did, they would have seen a warrant was out for his arrest. So then I get stuck with him again, but his mom had just passed away. And that's how he had money to get me out. We go to a hotel immediately because he didn't want to go to the house. I don't know why, but we went to a hotel. And fortunately, the hotel person ran his license, saw the warrant, called the cops, and the cops were there within an hour. That's how I was able to leave my ex at that point. I stayed with a friend for a couple days because actually...
And where's your son at during this?
The state took him. The state took custody, yep. So I called the lady who I moved in with and I said, this has happened. I'm coming back. And she said, no, Michelle, I don't want drama at my house. I'm sorry, but you got to go. I didn't know where to go, what to do, but I called shelters. The shelters were full. There was one for battered women. But they said, listen, you don't have anything to show for being battered. I don't externally.
And you're pregnant.
I had nowhere to go. I was pregnant, yeah. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to stay in the shelter, I got to show some kind of proof. And so what I did was I got a recorder, stuck it in my bra, went and saw him, got into an argument where he admitted things, and I got him on recording. I left, went to a friend's house, and, it wasn't a friend. I mean, she was, but she was the neighbor, actually, who I had run to that one day. That she knew what was going on, and she let me hide in there that day. And I played on the phone the recording so that he knew I had it. And then he was like, of course, you better get that recording back to me, da-da-da-da. Went back to see him because I had a feeling he'd throw me around a little bit. And he did, and that's how I got some bruises on my arms, and that's how I was able to stay in a shelter, because the battered women's shelter said, okay, yeah, we see things been going on. I also went to the police department, and I was like, look, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll do the restraining order, and so I got a restraining order against him. And I was in that shelter for 5 weeks. Fortunately, there was a restaurant who was affiliated with this shelter, and they employed women from there. So I started working. I got myself an $800 rusty little car and a $300 a month mobile home, and that's how I started over again.
And during this time, are you able to contact your son?
No.
Not at all.
They would not let me see him. And my youngest, the day I had him in the hospital, they took him into state custody because they said I hadn't gone to court yet over what happened with the first. And they let me visit my second child 1 hour every other week until he was 7 months old. And then we went to court over what happened. They terminated my rights as a parent. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't hire an attorney because I thought the pictures,
Sure.
Things were black and white to me, open and shut. My public defender I was given, but he had been telling me through the case he'd subpoenaed some people 10 minutes before the court hearing. No, I never subpoenaed anybody. I see this all the time. Blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Same crap. They had a guardian ad litem that was appointed to advocate for the child. Didn't meet him until 10 minutes before the final hearing. Did he check out my job? No. My house? No. Anything he was supposed to do? No. And eventually, after 3 people had gotten up for the state and the public defender did not ask any of them any questions. And I said, why aren't you asking any questions of these people? And he says to me, get the F out of my face, is what he said. I raised my hand, and the judge, let me talk. And I said, I want to defend myself at this point. I had already questions just in case written down. And then the guardian ad litem comes on stage, and I ask him, did you do this? Did you do that? Da, 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 da. And he had to admit, no. Well, I was told by my public defender, too, that anything I brought with me to show as proof to wait till the very end, and I would be able to show it. So the end of the hearing comes. And I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't been able to show my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I raised my hand while the judge is like wrapping things up. And he says, yes. And I said, well, I brought this paperwork to prove that I actually did pay rent. I did do this, I did take my son to the pediatrician, all this stuff. He said, I'm not required to look at anything that you have with you. He said, you'll get my decision in the mail. And 2 months later, I got it that my rights had been terminated. And at that point, I hired an attorney, got myself a second job. My sister moved in with me. She had 3 kids at the time. She needed help. I was sometimes sleeping 2 to 4 hours a night, but I was going to pay that attorney, and I had to work to pay him. I made my payments, all of them, and he did what he was supposed to do for 3 years. Showing me all the paperwork that come through and all this. I had to drive an hour each way to see him when I did.
So during all this time, you still have no contact
Still
with
no
your kids?
contact with my kids. Nope. I don't know if they're okay. I don't know where they are. I can say, though, that when my rights were initially terminated, there was one woman who saw me visit with my youngest, and she knew I loved my kids. And so she did tell me, she said, Michelle, I'm really not supposed to tell you this, but your kids now are together in the same home. They're with a couple who want to adopt if they get the opportunity. And one of them works for the school system, and I can't tell you what the other person does. And then she told me she took my little boy out to lunch a couple times and told me that his favorite color was green and that he liked to sing. And the only thing he remembered of me was that I was nice and that I had brown hair.
Wow.
And it just made me cry and cry.
Sure.
But, so almost 4 years I'm fighting to get my kids back. My ex shows up at my house with the final document with the decision. And it states that the decision had been upheld that my rights were terminated on two technicalities. One is that when the guardian ad litem got on stage, I did not formally declare with the word mistrial that there was a mistrial. And then secondly, that my house could not have been proven as a safe place for the child to come home to, which was ridiculous because the guardian ad litem never checked. And the proof that I had brought that initial time was me showing that I had actually hired a private investigator to come and check out my home. So
and maybe you were, I don't know, kidnapped.
Yeah. So it was just insane to me. Not only that, but in the first bit of paperwork, the judge's decision, he also said I smoked marijuana every now and then, which was interesting because in the case he said, "Do you do drugs?" And I was being smart. I was mad. And I said, 9.5 years ago, I smoked half a joint, and I want you guys to do a hair strand test right now to know I haven't done anything in 10 years, because I know you can look back that far. But they wouldn't do one.
Mm-hmm.
But I had proof, too, with me that I had to do 2 drug tests that were random by the job I had worked in.
Mm.
But anyway, put in there I smoked marijuana every now and then. He also put in there I had no valid driver's license, which was just completely out of the blue because I had a valid driver's license. Like, they put in there things that make you look like you're an unfit mom. But anyhow, I get this final, after 4 years, this letter comes along. And I was like, why is my ex bringing this to me and not my attorney? And this is dated like over a week ago. So I contact my attorney's office, and the lady says, the secretary, oh, well, he wanted to meet with you in person about that. So, well, nobody called to set up an appointment. So I drove down there a few days later with the letter. My ex, I don't know if my ex took out the last page or not, but she showed me there a copy, and there was another page to that. And on that last page, it said I had only 15 days to appeal the decision. And I was there on day 18. Mm. So I met with the attorney, and I was like, look, you knew from the beginning, no matter what the decisions, I wanted to keep going and keep going and keep going. And now I'm being told 15 days and I can do nothing. And he said, I'm sorry, you can't do anything. He should have filed. Yeah. So anyway, I wrote all the congressmen. I wrote the governor. I got in touch with both news stations. One of the news stations said, we want your story because you're right. The department has been falsifying documents, lying about things. Mm-hmm. And this honestly is not the only state that's doing it. So it's taking us months to compile all this stuff, and we'll get back with you. Well, they didn't get back with me a few months later. And then I decided to get back in the religion. And then, I got back in the religion. And then I thought, well, I'm going to be teaching the Bible. And at this point, I can't get my kids back. I had gone to court 2 months after that had happened, where it was like a placement hearing. And when I got to court, they said, oh, that case has been canceled. They've already been placed. Mm. They've been adopted. So I never lost hope, though. And about 8 years later, I finally located the woman who worked for the Department of Social Services, who I knew I loved my kids. The thing is after the first year that all this happened, she left the job. She was no longer there. So I couldn't go back and talk to her and ask her questions or anything. She was gone. But after 8 years, I found her with a search online and told her, I had gotten back into my religion, that, I still wanted my kids in my life. Please, tell me anything that you can. She was so nice to put me in touch with the lady and man that had my kids by email. So at that point, I could email.
What year was this?
This was 8 years later. So well, no, I'm sorry. It was 4 and then it was 8. So 12. It was 2019. And for 4 years, I emailed this woman, but she didn't really want me emailing a lot because she said it was hard for her to tell me no. The kids weren't ready to see me yet. They didn't understand and they were young. And but they had always been known that they were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that when you don't have your kids and you go through something like that, you worry all the time that they're okay. And you have nightmares looking for your children, and you have a hard time working on their birthdays. And I couldn't work on their birthdays. I couldn't sleep very good many nights until I knew that they were okay. And I was assured that they were in a very good, loving home. And I tried to believe it, because people can still lie or not know that either. When my oldest was 17 and a half, he decided that he was ready to see me. And first I was to see her. So she came and met with me at a coffee shop and we talked. And turns out the reason why I couldn't learn where the other parent worked is because she worked for the adoption agency who overlooked and she told me, she said, after 2-3 months, I fell in love with your son. And that was just awful. And, my son, too, he was born where on one hand, a couple fingers didn't separate completely. Mm-hmm. It never bothered me or my ex. Like, we just acted really like nothing was going on. He'd pick up his sippy cup and, it was fine. But in that situation, I was so worried that he had this complex maybe that his mama gave him away or didn't love him because of his hand, and that hurt me so bad. But it turns out he did great through school. He played football and wrestling. He did, and he was dating a cheerleader and had a lot of friends, and I was so happy. I mean, that they got taken care of the way they did. They would go to Disney World a couple times a year, some years, and unfortunately, I feel like that led to them not feeling the need to know their family because they had a lot of family provided to them with fun. But anyway, after I met with her, about a week later, I got to see him, and it couldn't have been a better meeting. I just cried.
And this was in 2019?
Yeah, immediately when I saw him, But I tried to gain my composure really fast for him. I didn't think I would just burst out crying like that, but I did. And he was so sweet, and they really seemed like good boys. And they sent me some pictures at Christmas time and things through the years, and they would always just be buddied up with each other and stuff. But since then, I put myself in some EMDR therapy because of the last time that my son had been around my ex and what happened. And it was starting to give me nightmares again. So in my consultations with people, I try to let them know, trauma does build up in your body, and you got to take care of it, at least to some degree. I mean, I have a lot of bad things that have happened in my life. So there's no way I could go through every bad memory and get them, fixed. But if you're having nightmares, that's stressing you out. You can't sleep. That affects your health. Just so much. But after my relationship too with my ex, when I got the restraining order for him, this is something too that I wanted to motivate people to do. Is many states have these classes you can take for free for abused spouses or, whoever. And I went to Compass of Carolina for women, and they did these free classes. And I learned about these words and things that a person would do to manipulate you. And I learned so much about the red flags to look for in a person so that I wouldn't make the same mistake again dating the same kind of person. And I put myself into individual therapy at the same time. The same place offered a sliding scale to people who wanted individual therapy. And I was like, that's, I think, important and needed too. And the therapist told me to read a book called Codependent No More. Because I obviously was, but that book changed my life. Codependent No More. It's a little book. It wasn't hard to read, but it helped me see that I was enabling this man for this long. It was my heart and things that I had been trained to help people, and serve people and not caring enough about myself that led me to dealing with some of that as long as I did. And then it went on longer because of situations that I couldn't control, and him, stalking me. And he broke into my house a couple times and still trying to get us back together. I mean, he told me, until you get married, Michelle, I still am going to believe that we're going to get back together. And I mean, it took 10 years for me to get married again. But, there are some resources out there, and sometimes they don't cost you money. Police, sometimes they don't help, but sometimes they do. Mm-hmm. And because I had taken out a restraining order with my ex, this was one time that I did not call the police, but they happened to be camping outside my home one night, and they saw him climb through the attic into my home. And that's how he got arrested. And I was really then able to help with my life changing and going somewhere else.
So, Michelle, the one thing that'll be noticeable about this episode, there will be a few things, is the absence of me talking. And the one reason for that, and here's the important part about that, is sometimes when a person is sharing such a vulnerable, intimate moment of the structure of their entire life, you don't need my voice to tell that story or to paint that picture. And it is now very clear to me why it was so important for you to be here today behind that mic telling your story. Because I think what you just hit on is something, nothing that I've been able to highlight or put some notice toward on my show yet, that is something that has always been an interest of mine, to know what exactly goes on in a domestic abuse relationship. And we've not really hit on those kind of things yet. And so you gave a perfect layout of how a person from yourself, just using your story, can find themselves in a position to where you're hoping for the best in someone. You feel like you can trust them. And I think that this is going to speak volumes to so many women out there, men too. But let's just be honest. The majority is going to be women, the majority. And they want to see the best. And so whenever that person does you wrong, they abuse you mentally, physically, whatever it is, but then they come right back and they're using all the right words. And they're manipulating, which is what I wrote down. Manipulation through intimidation, where at the same time, they're not only telling you how much they're going to be better, they're threatening you that if you don't do these things, then this could happen. But I promise I'm going to be better. But if you don't, this is going to happen. But I'm going to be better. And in your mind, you're this confliction of, I want this to work and I care about this person. But this person, you know, in your heart of hearts, is not going to change, and they're a bad individual, and you need to get away. So then the question starts to become, why doesn't that person just leave? Because that's the next thing that people that have not been in those positions, they say to themselves, why does that individual not just leave? Well, sometimes it's not as easy because maybe they don't have the strength physically, mentally, financially, but a person might look at you and say, well, she was easy to pick up and restart because you did that so many times in your life, and you even had the first relationship. But the reality of the matter is this: deep down, I think the person that was constantly trying to manipulate you, you were genuinely intimidated by. And the fear of what might happen next to you or your kids is what kept you on edge to try to make sure that you didn't disrupt the apple cart, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, the first year or so, it was me a lot trying to help. But then it was like pure fear after that.
Sure.
I was living a surreal nightmare and more worried, of course, about my kid than myself. And when he would threaten to hurt my kid, that was just me saying, okay, whatever. And honestly, like, I would have gone through too a lot of crying, sharing all of this just now. But this is what counseling and therapy and EMDR has done for me. It's given me the ability to sit here and share my story with people, because before I couldn't do that very well, or I was just too upset by it too. You know, like you feel like sometimes it's not healthy for you to relive something or to think about it, and you just want, or you want to just suppress things. But yeah, it's.
Your story is one that I really wish we had a series to put together. You know, sometimes it's just like that, right? So there's so much depth to something. Yeah. It's hard to cover in a short span.
That's what I was kind of referring to earlier. Like, we might run out of time.
I get it. But you know what? And this is why that I just let you tell your story for so long, because at the end of the day, there was no questions I was going to add that was going to change or alter what needed to be said in that moment. You were absolutely on point with everything. And just wanting to recap on that, though, the reason why so many times a person starts down the road of a bad relationship, even though they know it's toxic, is because they care so much about the individual. But then it turns into that fear factor. And then when you have something added to that layer, and that being children, now you're fearful on a whole nother level. And then you add another dynamic to this, which I think is probably resonating with so many people out there, is the fact that you didn't necessarily have that close-knit group of people you could trust, that you could go to help pull you out of that. And those that you did know didn't want to get involved. And I think that's another common piece of this story. Absolutely. And then let's just add one more layer to this, if we may. And this is sad. As a public servant, I was a firefighter paramedic, is in the military. So over 20 years of my life, I've dedicated to being a part of other people's lives. And I think it is easy to see a situation that you may have seen 1,000 times over, as police officers were kind of alluding to with you. And they see that thing being the same no matter what. And so the level of distrust towards the people is because they've had other situations that they relate to, where that is such a wrong thing to do as a first responder. And in fact, I would even say this, and I hope it's better now, and maybe it was an isolated thing in some areas, and maybe it's not like that everywhere, but I have a feeling that that still takes place regularly, is that there's distrust for the person. So the individual, the cop, even the paramedics, whoever it is, the nurses, the doctors, they feel like they're enablers if they just feed into that, rather than take that person's word and err on the side of help. Right. They err on the side of judgment. Yeah. And that's the worst thing to do. That's the worst thing to do, because then that puts a person like yourself constantly in danger of your life. That's why women end up killed all the time in a domestic relationship, because people didn't take action when they should have.
It makes me so mad, because me trying to get the help that I needed, and they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry, you have to have so many 911 calls before we'll do this, or
so
you
ridiculous.
Have to have, you know, or he has to be here in order for, like, even though they can see this or that. Or I'm sorry, but he's got so many days to go, even though we know that he just did this to you. So it's awful. But that's one reason too why when I went to the news stations and then I was waiting their response, but then I decided to go back into the religion, and I thought, well, again, if people hear that I'm a mom who lost her kids, they're going to automatically assume what so many people do, and they're not going to respect me. They're not going to want to listen to how they should live their life.
To think that maybe there was a whole thing that took place.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's too why it was so surreal to me, because anybody that knew me before all that could tell you, like, kids would crowd to me. I would read to them, like, in the congregation. I would sit in the back on a couch and have like 5, 6 kids with me. I'd be reading to them. I love children. I never would hurt them. Yeah. For somebody to think that I lost my kids, it's embarrassing for me to talk about and have people think that about me. But it was even worse then, and I was more worried then. Now I'm more like, I don't care. There's going to be people out there who will have been treated the same way I was, who was innocent, who lost their kids for the wrong reason, and who have tried very hard, who want to do better, but they might feel stuck. And they need to know that if you keep taking little steps and you put yourself around people that will help you. When my job that I have now, working with a doctor, I work for myself, but I work alongside a doctor.
We're going to talk about that too.
Yeah. So I told myself I'm not getting another job until I'm working with a doctor. Like, that's what I wanted to do. You've got to make sure that you start putting yourself around the right kind of people. Otherwise, you'll end up in a lot of the same situations later and not knowing what to do, or having the right kind of help, or even getting stronger yourself. And so I made sure that I had $100 to my name because I was still waiting to get the right job. And I found a job working for a chiropractor and a functional neurologist. And he's been amazing. And I love my job. I work with patients and I get hugs and smiles all day. It's great for me to hear, that I am helping people feel better before they leave. But I have a melancholy with me every day because I miss my kids. Every accomplishment I have, I wish my kids were with me. If I'm at the park, I wish my kids were with me. It's even surprising to me how much you miss and still love your kids when you haven't had them for so long.
It's a mother's love.
And so I really feel for people that have been through the same kind of stuff and have tried so hard, but there are certain things that they can do to really empower themselves. Get yourself some counseling or therapy and stop hanging around anybody who is negative. It doesn't even matter if it's like cursing or toxic or the abuse that you're used to hearing. It could just be negative.
Just
talk.
constantly putting you down,
always
condescending.
I feel sick today, or I feel this or that today, and life is always, doing this to me. If they're negative all the time, they're bringing you down, and life is life, and negative moments happen, and there's nothing wrong with facing reality and making a statement. But when you hear things, and then you start talking that way, and then because you're hearing
it's a poison.
Yeah, and I try to tell my clients too, listen, what you hear, you believe more so. So it's bad enough that you think it, but if you say it out loud, that's even worse.
Speaking it into reality.
Yeah. And then when you say it out loud, your body reacts. And then your body does bad things. I tell folks, listen, you wake up in the morning, you say, oh, I feel terrible today. Well, what did my body just do? I just lost my posture. But I feel excited. Even if you don't, just saying it actually kind of makes you do things like clench your hands, or you actually start feeling good. It's important that what you say out loud is going to be good, because the bad is going to make your body react. And then, it's just a snowball
I'm always
effect.
I'm about to crush this day.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, here's what I would say, Michelle, because we are at the end of our day, but here's what I want you to know. I want you to know, one, the chapters that have been written before you obviously can't go back and change. You can always start today and write a new chapter for tomorrow. And the point of that is this: you have went through a lot of stuff. You have a lot to offer other people, and you have used those moments to now start that process, not just helping others, but healing yourself. And you're absolutely right. One of the things you said at some point in our conversation was you have to be healthy to help someone else. And as a practitioner myself, as a paramedic, that was number one. Rule number one, you've got to be healthy if you want to help other people. And so that's mentally and physically, and you have to be on point, and you should wake up every day with that enthusiasm about today can be a great day. If you think today's going to be a bad day, guess what today's going to be? It's going to be a bad day because you're going to find the bad to make it a bad day. But you've moved forward. You've done so many things, and I would not be able to end this episode without saying this is what you can do with yourselves. Look, you've been through some tough roads. Find a positive path. Find the thing that is passionate to you and start to create some stuff. So you've created your own creams, right? So this is like and I wish I had my glasses on. I don't clearly
it's
handsome.
A face cream.
Then it's a face cream. Okay. Got to have the glasses to read nowadays.
That's a
the way it works. And this is a sunscreen, and this is Massageol.
Yes.
And so the bottom line is, when we talked, you said, and this is so true, so many things that we put on our skin we don't always think about as being toxic to our body. But our skin, whether or not you knew this, guys, is our largest organ. It is your largest actual organ. People don't think of skin as an organ, but it is. And so you absorb stuff from the atmosphere, from the ointments that you put on. And those kinds of things obviously can lead to toxicity.
Absolutely.
I know you said that you had eczema growing up. And so these things kind of led you down a path to think about skin health and holistic health. And this is the part two that you guys got to go check out. So Michelle Kolcan wrote a book called Homicide by Hygiene. And this is all about connecting with yourself, finding the healthier version of you, and then using, and this is what you're doing right here today and what you've been doing, using your trauma to heal others, help other people feel more normal. Because I think that's another thing. People sometimes feel isolated and like the thing they're going through is so unique that no one else knows that or feels that. And you're so on an island. And the truth is, it's not true at all. That's the reality of so many people. And you go through this stuff. And just like you, where you were gaslighted by individuals and not taken seriously, and you find yourself in a depraved situation where you've been a victim of multiple bad things that's happened to a person, here you are smiling, talking about positive mindset, talking about a healthier you, and hoping and wishing and dreaming for that day that you can reconnect with your kids. And I guarantee you, that day's coming. That day's coming, Michelle.
I hope so.
I promise you it will, because here's one thing I can tell you from personal experience. Multiple individuals I know that have been adopted, including my daughter-in-law. The one thing that eats at a person is wanting to know their roots, the people that they share DNA with. And there comes a point in time in a person's life where they question, well, I wonder why I do this or wonder why I do that. And it's not anything about the adopted parents. They don't think less of them as being the caretakers at all. But my daughter-in-law, as an example, needed to know who her mom and dad was. And I'm so thankful that she was able to meet her mom and get to know her a little bit before she passed away. Yeah. And I guarantee you there will be a day your boys, 2 boys, they're going to reconnect with you. And it's going to be so sweet. And in so many ways, we can never think about a difficult time as a blessing. But you were going through a lot of stuff, and it doesn't sound like you had signed up for it. We can't say it was your fault. You went through a bad time with a lot of things that happened to you. But maybe it did shield them from things you could have never seen.
That's true. I hope that that's what it was. And I want people to realize, too, that all of this, it wasn't because somebody gave me a lot of money. This was a slow process, too. Sure. But there are schools, you can go to, financial aid. I was really weary about doing that. I was really scared to ask the doctor, can I carry some of my products in your lobby? Sometimes you just got to ask and you'd be surprised.
You're right.
And I've had people realize that I do what I do because I care about a person's health and their livelihood. And that's why I do my products. And I've got more than those. I got a whole line, and I'm doing more, and some for pets and pregnant ladies and kids. And but it's been a road, and I appreciate you so much letting me share this today.
I'm going to extend an invitation.
Okay.
So she's a part of my Blox family. Y'all don't know what that is? You have to look it up. Blox. My Blox family is always going to be my family. Tyler came down here, one of the judges. He was on the show.
That was cool.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. This is my invitation. There will be a time, and I am calling this shot, where your boys are going to reconnect with you. And when that happens,
I believe they will at some point.
My invitation is that all 3 of you come and you're a guest on this show. Now, I'm also projecting that I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. That is the game plan, that Coach Camp doesn't stop tomorrow. So when this happens, I want you to reconnect with me, bring them down here, and all 3 of you be on the show together. What do you think?
I hope they would enjoy it as much as I would.
Would you take that offer?
Absolutely, I would.
So, Michelle, we are at the end of our time. Is there anything you would like to leave my listeners with? And there's so much more I could talk to you about. I know. I want them to check out your book, check out your product line, obviously. How could they reach you?
And if they do get the book, it is available on my website. It's happyhealthnaturally.org. This is available on Amazon, so you get it cheapest with Kindle if you wish. But also my business name has changed.
Okay.
So in the book, it says Happy Health Naturally, but it's now Natural Health and Skin. So people realize more. So I do
Natural
skin.
Health and Skin. I'm going to make sure I put that into the thing. Then.
So if they ever want to come see my store in Asheville, I just opened a storefront a few months ago, and it's Natural Health and Skin in Asheville, North Carolina. And if they ever want to see a functional neurologist, he's amazing. Dr. Wallachy in Asheville, too. He's right next door to me. And people drive hours to see him. You can't even get a functional neurologist in every state of the U.S. right now, and they do things naturally, and he's got heart.
There's hope, there's healing, and there's a brighter tomorrow. You got to want it, you got to work toward it, and you got to think about it. So is there any last message you'd like to leave as you step out and go back to Asheville?
Just start. Don't be afraid to ask for help that you need, or even maybe some promotional help, it's amazing how many people want to support good work. I have people that have stopped by my store just to give me tips on increasing my business because they believe in what I do and know who I am. And they'll make extra trips to say, hey, I found this for you, or I think you should do this. But yeah, just start. You cannot get to where you want to be if you don't start walking in that direction. And like you say, the past is the past. You don't know what tomorrow is going to be, so how dare you say what kind of day it's going to be, because it hadn't happened yet. And
you got to start the journey.
We got our own choices. Yeah.
And look, positivity is going to keep you on that path. Yep. As soon as you let those bad thoughts creep in, it's easy to get straight off of that. So stay focused, keep working toward a better tomorrow. And here's the bigger thing, and this is the part that encourages me, and you have inspired me, because when you find time out of your life to drive here to show that this has value as well, your story is immensely valuable to everybody else, but it shows too that what I'm doing makes a difference in people's lives. Being able to do this myself, I'm always humbled by it. So this is what I'm going to tell you guys. Please go out right now, share the story with everybody you know, because somebody out there needs this more than you could ever imagine. I want you guys to continue to tune in. Go to my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com, subscribe to my YouTube, and until next time, Coach Camp.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything. All it takes is some time and some clarity to find your identity. It's mind over everything.